There is a voice in your head. You know the one. It wakes up before you do. It's already talking before your eyes open. It tells you that you're behind, that you're not good enough, that the thing you want is too big for someone like you, that people don't really like you, they just tolerate you, that your best years might already be gone, that the mistakes you made 3 years ago or 10 years ago somehow define what you're allowed to have now. That voice has an opinion on everything. Your body, your choices, your relationships, your future. It narrates your entire life like a sports commentator who only notices when you drop the ball. And here's the thing, most people never stop to question. They think that voice is them. They think those thoughts are the truth, that the running commentary in their head is an accurate report of reality, that when the voice says, "You're not smart enough," well, it must know something. It lives inside you. It has all the information. Why would it lie? So people spend their whole lives arguing with it, hiding from it, trying to silence it, trying to earn its approval, building entire personalities around managing it. They work themselves to exhaustion trying to prove it wrong, or they collapse under it and decide it must be right. Both responses share the same mistake. Both treat the voice as if it is you. It isn't. And today I want to show you, through some of the sharpest minds in human history, exactly why that voice is not who you are, and what happens to your entire life when you finally understand that. Let's start with the Buddha. Not the decorative statue, not the oversimplified version people put on fridge magnets. The actual thinking. The Buddha taught something called Anatta. It's a Pali word. It means no self, or not self. And it is one of the most radical ideas any human being has ever put forward. What it says is this: there is no fixed, permanent, unchanging self inside you. Most people live as if they have a core identity, a solid me sitting somewhere behind their eyes, a permanent thing that has always been them and always will be them. And they believe their thoughts come from that core self, that the thoughts are expressions of who they truly are. The Buddha says, look closer. Look at your thoughts right now. Are they consistent? Do they stay the same? An hour ago you felt confident, now you feel doubt. Yesterday you were certain about a decision. Today you're not. Last year you were a different person than you are right now. 10 years ago you barely recognized yourself. Where is this permanent self? Where is the fixed you that the voice is supposedly speaking from? The Buddha taught that what we call the self is actually 5 constantly changing processes: perception, feeling, form, mental formations, and consciousness, all running simultaneously, none of them permanent, none of them a solid foundation for identity. It's more like a river than a rock, always moving, never the same water twice. Now here's why this matters for the voice in your head. If there is no fixed self, then the voice has no throne to speak from. It has no authority. It is just another passing mental formation. A thought among thoughts. A cloud moving through a sky it does not own. When the voice says, you are a failure, the Buddha is asking you to notice who exactly is the you it's talking about. Point to it, find it. Because the more carefully you look, the less solid it becomes. The thought appears. The thought passes. The thought is not you. Friedrich Nietzsche would walk into this conversation and immediately make it more uncomfortable. That's what he does. Nietzsche did not care about comforting you. He cared about making you stronger, and his diagnosis of the voice in your head is brutal. He called it slave morality. Here's what he meant. In his book, On the Genealogy of Morality, Nietzsche argued that throughout history, people who felt weak, powerless, or oppressed developed a particular way of thinking. Instead of pursuing strength and self-creation, they built a value system based on guilt, shame, and self-denial. They turned their powerlessness into a virtue. They called meekness holy. They called suffering noble. They told themselves that wanting too much was wrong, that standing out was dangerous, that the right thing to do was stay small and quiet and acceptable. That system got passed down through culture, through religion, through family, through school, and it lives now in the voice in your head. When you have a big dream and the voice immediately says, who do you think you are? That is slave morality talking. When you succeed at something and the voice says, don't get too comfortable, it won't last. That is slave morality talking. When you want something deeply and the voice says, you don't deserve that, that is not wisdom. That is a centuries-old system of self-suppression that was built to keep people manageable and has been living in your skull rent-free. Nietzsche's answer was what he called the will to power, not power over other people, power over yourself. The drive to grow, to create, to become more than you currently are. He believed every human being has this drive at their core, and that the voice, the inner critic, the shame machine, is the thing that fights against it. He would look you in the eye and say, the voice is not your conscience, it is your cage. And then he'd ask you something even harder. He'd ask, have you been feeding it? Because every time you obey it, every time you shrink because it told you to, every time you walk away from something you wanted because the voice made you feel unworthy, you make it stronger. The voice doesn't go away when you obey it. It just learns that it can control you. Sartre comes in next and he takes the pressure up another level. We talked about Sartre in the last video. Existence precedes essence. You are not born with a fixed nature. You create yourself through your choices. But there is a specific part of Sartre's thinking that applies directly to the voice. He called it the look. Sartre noticed something about human consciousness. He said that when we become aware that we are being watched, or even when we imagine being watched, we start to see ourselves as objects, as things, as fixed, definable, finished products that can be judged. And here's the dark part. We do this to ourselves. The voice in your head is you performing the look on yourself. It is you standing outside your own body and judging what it sees like a cold critic at an audition. When you lie awake at night replaying something embarrassing you said 5 years ago, that's the look. When you imagine what people think of you, and then preemptively agree with the worst version, that's the look. When you decide not to try something because you can already picture yourself failing and being seen failing, that's the look. Sartre says this is one of the deepest traps of human existence, because when you reduce yourself to an object, when you let the voice define you as a fixed, finished, already judged thing, you deny your own freedom. You pretend you were a statue when you are actually a river. He would say, you are not what you have done. You are not what people think of you. You are not even what you think of yourself right now. You are what you choose in every moment going forward. The voice that tells you otherwise is not revelation. It is self-objectification. And it is a choice. Even if it doesn't feel like one, you are choosing to believe it. You can choose something else. Now Camus is going to say something that sounds cold at first, but is actually one of the most freeing things in this entire video. The voice in your head takes itself very seriously. It believes its judgments are important. It believes that the story it's telling about you, the failures, the limitations, the shame, carries real weight in the universe, that somewhere something is keeping score. Camus would say, nothing is keeping score. The universe does not have a file on you. There is no cosmic court where the voice's charges against you are being heard. The verdict the voice keeps delivering, guilty, not enough, too broken, is happening in a courtroom that does not exist. Remember the absurd. The gap between what you want to matter, to be judged fairly, to have your worth confirmed, and what the universe gives you, silence, indifference, nothing. The voice is trying to fill that gap. It appoints itself judge because the silence is unbearable. Better to be condemned by the voice than to sit with the terrifying freedom of being uncondemned by anything. But Camus says, don't fill the gap with a voice. Sit with the silence, because on the other side of the silence is not emptiness, it's freedom. Sisyphus had a voice too. Every time the boulder rolled back, you can imagine what that voice said. Again? Still? After everything? What's the point? And Camus says Sisyphus looked at the voice the same way he looked at the boulder. It's just another thing on the hill. It doesn't change what needs to be done. It doesn't change who he is. The voice is your boulder. It will keep rolling back. It will keep talking. The question isn't how to silence it permanently. The question is whether you are going to keep mistaking it for the truth. And then there is Heidegger. And Heidegger is going to say something that should wake you up like cold water. The voice in your head, most of it, is not even originally yours. Heidegger talked about something he called das Man, the they. The anonymous crowd. the generalized, faceless mass of social expectations and inherited opinions that we absorb from the world around us before we ever have a chance to think for ourselves. You did not invent the standards you're holding yourself to. You were handed them. By parents who were handed them by their parents, by schools that needed you to fit into boxes, by media that profits from your insecurity, by a culture that measures human worth in productivity, appearance, achievement, and approval. The voice that tells you you're not enough, it learned what enough means from the they. And the they has never actually seen you. The they doesn't know you. The they is a crowd of people who are all simultaneously listening to their own version of the same voice, a voice that also came from the they. It's voices judging people for not meeting standards set by voices judging people, all the way down. Heidegger says the only exit is what he called authentic existence. Owning your life as actually yours, not performing it for the they, not measuring it against the they standards, but asking, in the face of your own death, with your own finite time, what actually matters to me, not to them, to me. When you ask that question, the voice gets quieter. Not because it disappears, but because you stop treating it as the authority on your worth. Before we get practical, I want to sit with something for a moment. Because I think there's a question sitting in the back of your mind right now, and it deserves a real answer. The question is, if the voice is not me, then where did it come from? And why does it sound so convincing? This is where all 5 of these thinkers actually agree on something, which is rare. Philosophers do not agree on much. But on this, they are all pointing at the same thing from different angles. The voice is a survival tool that outlived its usefulness. Think about it from the beginning. You were a small child, completely dependent on the people around you. If those people rejected you, you were in danger. Not emotionally, physically. A child who is abandoned does not survive. So your brain developed a system. It learned to constantly scan for signs of disapproval. It learned to anticipate criticism before it arrived. It learned to preemptively shrink, apologize, perform, and adjust, all to keep the people around you close, because keeping them close meant staying alive. The voice was born in that system. It was your protector. It was trying to keep you safe by keeping you small enough to be accepted. The Buddha would say, the voice arose from attachment, the desperate clinging to approval and belonging that the self constructs to avoid suffering. Nietzsche would say, it was the slave inside you, learning to survive a world that punished strength. Sartre would say, it was the child learning to see itself through the eyes of the people it depended on. Camus would say it was the human need for meaning, attaching itself to the only source of meaning a child has, the approval of its parents. Heidegger would say it was they enter in you before you were old enough to have a self to defend against it. They are all right, and they are all saying the same thing. The voice made sense once, in a different time with a smaller body, in a world where your survival depended on other people's opinion of you. But you are not that child anymore. You do not need to earn your place at the table by staying small. You do not need the approval of the people who planted those first seeds of doubt. You are not going to be abandoned for wanting too much. The danger the voice was built to protect you from is mostly gone. But the voice kept running. Because nobody told it the threat had passed. Because nobody showed it the evidence. Because it was doing its job so quietly, so automatically, so deeply buried inside what felt like your own thoughts, that you never even questioned whether it still needed to be there. It doesn't. You built it for a world you no longer live in. And now it is running your adult life on a child's fear. That is not a flaw in you. It is not weakness. It is just biology doing what biology does, building systems for the environment you are in, and then keeping those systems running long after the environment changed. But here is the thing about systems. Once you can see them, you can change them. Once you know what the voice is and where it came from, it stops being your identity and starts being something you can work with, something you can notice, something you can, over time, retrain. Not silence, not destroy, not argue out of existence. Just see clearly for what it is. A frightened child's coping mechanism operating inside an adult's life. An old map being used to navigate a new city. A smoke alarm that goes off every time you cook because it was calibrated for a house fire. The alarm is not wrong. The alarm is just not reading the room correctly anymore. And you, the adult, the aware, the free human being that all 5 of these philosophers believed you fundamentally are, you are the one who gets to update the calibration. That is not small work. That is maybe the most important work a person can do. Now let's get practical, because philosophy that doesn't change how you live on a Tuesday morning is just entertainment. Here is what you actually do with all of this. The first thing is the hardest. You have to stop arguing with the voice. I know that sounds wrong. It feels like if you stop arguing, the voice wins. But arguing with the voice is what keeps you trapped inside it. Every time you argue, no, I am good enough. Yes, I do deserve this. Actually, I'm not a failure. You are treating the voice as a legitimate opponent. You are giving it a seat at the table. More, you are behaving as if its accusations deserve a defense. The Buddhist teaching on Anatta shows you a different move. You don't fight the thought. You watch it. You notice a thought appeared. It says, I am not enough. And then, and this is the whole thing, you ask, who is watching this thought right now? There is something in you that can observe the voice, that can notice it without becoming it. That is the awareness underneath the noise. That awareness is not the voice. It is older than the voice. It was there before the voice started, and it will be there when the voice finally quiets. That awareness, that watching presence, is closer to what you actually are than any thought the voice has ever produced. The second thing is to track where the voice got its material. Nietzsche showed you that the voice is not original. It is recycled shame from systems that were never built for your flourishing. So when the voice delivers a verdict, sit down and ask, where did this standard come from? Who told me this is what I'm supposed to be? Did I actually choose this value, or was it handed to me before I was old enough to question it? 9 times out of 10, you will trace the voice's cruelest lines back to a specific source. A parent who criticized in a particular way, a teacher who made you feel stupid once in front of a class, a culture that told you your body or your background or your ambition was wrong, a relationship that left you convinced you were too much or not enough. The voice didn't come from the truth. It came from a person or a system that was imperfect, limited, and often wrong. When you see that, when you trace the line from the cruel thought back to its actual human source, it loses its authority. It stops sounding like the universe speaking. It starts sounding like what it always was, someone else's wound that you've been carrying, as if it were your own. The third thing is to stop waiting for the voice to approve you before you act. This is Kierkegaard's leap applied to the inner life. You will never think your way to self-worth. You will never receive enough evidence to satisfy the voice. That is not how the voice works. The voice is not an objective fact-checker waiting for sufficient data before it issues a verdict of, okay, you're good enough now. The voice moves the goalposts. Every time you reach what it said you needed to reach, it updates its requirements. The approval you are waiting for is not coming from the inside. And it is definitely not coming from the outside. What Kierkegaard would tell you is, choose to live as if you are already enough before you feel it. Not because you've proved it. Not because the voice has agreed, but because you are a free human being and you are making the leap. The feeling follows the action, not the other way around. Act like someone who believes in themselves, not because you fully do yet, but because the acting is what builds the believing. The jump creates the ground. The fourth thing is the one nobody wants to hear. Heidegger's beam toward death applied to the voice. You are going to die. Your life is a specific, finite amount of time. Every day that the voice keeps you small, keeps you from the relationship, the work, the creative thing, the honest conversation, the life you actually want, is a day that is gone, not delayed. Gone. The voice is costing you your life, not metaphorically. Actually, the hours you spend in shame, spirals, in self-attack, in paralysis, in performing for the... Those are real hours of your real life that you're not getting back when you put it that way. When you sit with that, it should make you angry, not at yourself, at the voice, because the voice has been stealing from you. It has been taking your time, your confidence, your joy, your willingness to try, and it has been spending that currency on nothing, on protecting you from a judgment that was never real, from a court that was never in session, from a standard that was never yours. You do not have time for this anymore, not because you need to be more productive, but because your life is actually happening right now, and the voice is narrating it in a way that stops you from living it. Let me be honest with you about something. I'm not going to tell you the voice disappears. I'm not going to tell you that once you understand these ideas, you will wake up tomorrow and the inner critic will be gone and you will float through your days in perfect philosophical peace. That would be a lie, and you deserve better than a comfortable lie. The voice keeps talking. Even in people who spend decades working on themselves, even in people who have read everything, even in therapists and philosophers and monks, the voice does not retire. What changes is the relationship. Right now, for most people, the relationship is the voice speaks and I believe it, or the voice speaks and I fight it. Both of those responses are the voice winning. What these philosophers are pointing you toward is a third option. The voice speaks, and you watch it. You recognize it for what it is, not the truth about you, not the verdict of the universe, not the real you speaking, but a mental event. A weather pattern. A thing that is happening, not a thing that is you. And from that watching place, that calm, clear place that the Buddha called the witnessing awareness, that Heidegger called authentic existence, that Nietzsche called the will to power, that Sartre called radical freedom. From that place, you make your next choice. Not the voice's choice, yours. Here is where I land with all of this. The cruelest thing the voice ever does is convince you that it is you. Because once you believe that, you stop questioning it. You stop examining it. You start protecting it, because attacking the voice feels like attacking yourself. But it is not you. You are the one who hears it. You are the awareness that notices the thought. You are the freedom that exists in the space between the thought appearing and what you do next. You are the river, not the particular water that's passing through right now. The voice is loud. Sometimes it is vicious. Sometimes it sounds so much like you that the difference seems impossible to find. But the difference is there. It has always been there. It is the difference between the sound in the room and the silence the room is made of. The voice fills the silence. But the silence was there first, and it will be there long after the voice has said everything it has to say. That silence. That open, unjudged, unchained, unfinished space that you actually are. That is what no thought can touch. Not even the worst one. Not even the one you've believed the longest. Because you were never that voice. You were always the one listening to it. And the one listening was never broken.